Transferable skills.
From Cackle Media, this is Transferable Skills. I'm Noah Mishkin, and today's guest is Karen Ozeri, who shares her skills journey from digital ad sales into career coaching. I hope you enjoy. Karen, welcome to the show. Great to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Me too. So in the beginning of your career, were you in advertising or doing something completely different?
Actually, my first job out of college was in national radio ad sales. I lasted with that for about a year and then switched over to the ad agency side. And then I switched into ad sales within the tech world. So everything that I did outside of that small little radio stint was all in digital. So internet, and then I slowly migrated my way over to mobile, cell phones, etc.
You think you're a natural born seller? Was sales what you wanted to focus on, or was it advertising?
That's an interesting question. So no on sales. Ultimately, why I got into sales later, not the radio specific sales job, was for money, quite honestly. So I saw that a lot of the people that were on the other side of the desk from me, right? I used to be the buyer. And so the sellers were just earning exponential income and working way less. And I couldn't quite understand why the setup was the way that it was. And I will say that once I got into sales, one of the things that made me successful as a seller was that I had been in the shoes of the people that I was selling to previously. And so it was less about buy this, we're the best, but I do think I had this sort of innate understanding of how to speak to them, but also how to solve the problems and position the stuff that we were selling as a relevant solution to what they were looking for, whether that was personally or professionally. Sales was never on my radar in college in any way. I took a communications class, and that was the class that I enjoyed the most. So I just decided that would be my major.
I think there's also a lot of people in college who take a long time to figure out what they want their major to be. And there's probably an even greater number of people who then switch their career paths from whatever that concentration was and what their thought process was back then.
Yeah, absolutely. And in my work as a coach, I work with people later in their career who it's been on their radar for a long time of this question of what am I doing here? And so that's the thing that I help people navigate is, okay, like this is what I picked back at this time when I was this person, and this is what interested me. We make decisions about our life when we're so young, our brain isn't fully matured, developed yet. And then we find ourselves 15 years later in this career path doing this thing and asking ourselves, why are we doing this? Yeah, that's why I love your podcast.
Thank you. I think it's very relatable to most people. Making choices before you even know what you want or who you are. You can always make new decisions today for tomorrow. There's nothing wrong with changing. In fact, I would compliment those people because they've made an evaluation and said, okay, I need something different. And I'm going to make that change even if it's hard, because continuing down the same path without making a change, I would assume in many cases is an easier path. Default is easier, but making a change requires thought and process and execution.
Yeah. And it requires a sense of trust in the process and the unfolding of it. That willingness to follow your curiosity is a huge piece of figuring out what else you're going to do. It's not linear. And to the point of your entire podcast, I believe in the work that I do that there's so many clues in people's past about what it is that they're meant to do next. And it's the things that they're good at. It's the things that they enjoyed doing. When I talk to clients, in my mind, it's this visual of they'll be talking about things, and I have this visual of a glow, like the earth at night, like an aerial view of the earth at night. And it's, oh, there's a flag that popped up. There's a flag that popped up, because there's so many clues. It's just a matter of starting to find them and then weave them and put them together.
The three things I want to ask you right now that you can answer in any way you want is, first of all, explain for our audience listeners what you're doing today, because we're already talking about your current work. And the other thing is how much of your own personal background in the services that you're selling adds to that same clientele did you infuse into the conversation when you're selling that ad space? And then the third piece here is how much of your clients' backgrounds do you explore and pick apart in order to tease out the skills and strengths that they have acquired or intrinsically naturally possess in order to help them find that path moving forward?
So the work that I do today is really focused on supporting high achieving, typically very successful women, typically, with doing something new and more fulfilling. What that sometimes looks like initially is sort of like subtext to that is supporting them with creating greater freedom, flexibility, and fulfillment. And fulfillment is part of the initial spiel, so to speak. But it's really about having people reevaluate what they're doing and determining if they want to make a pivot or if they're most of my clients do eventually do something different. They leave. But for some people, it's like a 6-month thing. And then for other people, it's a 3 to 4 year thing to make that pivot. So it's also looking at like, how can you create changes in the immediate term to give yourself what you're looking for down the road. And down the road is the holy grail in some ways, but how can you have more freedom and flexibility now?
Would you mind exploring with me a little further what you just described as the time period that you distinguish between those that are, it's pretty near future, they're trying to make a change and it will only take a few weeks, months, and then the other side, which is 3 to 5 years. What is the distinguishing differences between the two? Why is that by choice, or are they just two completely different profiles?
That's a good question. It's a really good question. I think a lot of it comes down to readiness in terms of how much have they been in action around this already? Like with some clients, I meet them and they've been on this journey already and they're like ready.
But do you mean like
and then you have
they've been thinking about it, or they've been taking physical, real action? They've been thinking about this for a while? Or they've been actually pursuing steps in order to make that change happen?
It's a really good question, because I think at the end of the day, everyone's different. There's no like clear trend that I would say that I see on that. However, people who've been taking action on their own and like trying to do stuff to resolve the situation, but they're not getting the traction that they want, those are the people that are closer in terms of readiness, like because they've already decided that it's happening. Yeah. And then the people who are in that longer window, they know that it's happening, but they're also just not ready. And what I see with a lot of those people who tend to be like very senior in their careers is they're not ready because what they perceive to be the outcome of change is such a drastic change to their lifestyle that they just cannot wrap their head around how that's going to happen. It's like they're getting ready to be ready, which is what a phrase that one of my friends coined, but they just need time, and they also need to build self-trust, and they need to evaluate their finances, and there's so many things that go into it. And when you're working full-time in particular, you just don't have as much time to go out and explore, especially when you're in these senior level jobs. So it tends to be like a slower burn. The opportunity that I get with my clients is to start to address some of the habits or skills or ways of being that we don't necessarily want to follow them into the new thing. So if you're a workaholic, if you just leave one thing and go to another, that pattern is going to follow you to the other thing. So what I get to do with clients who are on this longer term path is we start to look at those patterns and identify, like, how can you break this down? How can you address this now where you are so that it doesn't become this thing that you're displeased with later?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people will look at, oh, I work so much, that's the problem. So they think that changing the career is the solution, but it's not always the solution. Sometimes the solution is, why is it? Like, what 6 layers down? Like, why are you working this hard in the first place? And addressing that as the root opportunity.
Yeah.
It's not an issue so much as it is an opportunity. Does that make sense?
Oh, Does that make sense? Holy geez. What you just said over the last 4 minutes could be a 10-part series that we do. There isn't a thing that you just said that doesn't resonate with me personally. Your take on people transferring those bad habits and bad skills and bad behaviors from their past job into their next one, and you helping them coach them out of those bad habits and behaviors is very similar to any kind of therapy or rehabilitation, where you have to analyze what didn't go well or what didn't feel right and what could I do to improve my lifestyle for the next time. That's very important. I've never heard anyone actually talk about that when it comes to career changes. So first of all, thank you for educating me on that. That's pretty mind-blowing for me. And
I have a thought. Do you want to hear it?
sure, please.
It's like the opposite of it could be like overwork, for example. That could be a transferable skill, but that's not the transferable skill that you want to take. And when I think about this notion of overwork, one of the things that I work on a lot with clients is they are amazing at getting things done.
Yeah.
Right? They're driven, they're motivated, right? These are incredible skills, but it's not an incredible skill when it means that you prioritize work above everything else. It's not an incredible skill when it comes at the cost of your health. And so that's not something we want to transfer from A to B if possible.
Oh, you just lit a match in this entire theory, because it hadn't really occurred to me. The obvious are the positive transferable skills. I had yet until this moment to really consider the risks of the bad transferable skills.
You don't want the transferable skill to be the default of how you've been showing up in this way that doesn't serve you. So how do you want to play? And like really leaning into trusting yourself and what you need in the same way that you can do it for a client, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I tend to reflect a lot to clients, and I've seen it with myself too in my own story, is that it's like learning to work in the ways that you do for your clients, for yourself, and dedicating your energy to you versus something that's outside of you. So if you can be successful in this area, like you can be successful in this.
Totally.
It's a little obscure, but most of the clients that I work with, part of the overwork was related to having this bigger question of what am I doing with my life? And so that's a big question, right? To sit with, what else could I do if it's not this? Yeah. What am I doing? And most of us are not taught to sit with big questions like that. So what do? We just go and get busy, and we use busyness as a way to avoid asking ourselves real, meaningful questions and facing things that can often feel scary or difficult, and they may or may not be, but it feels that way inside of ourselves. And I would say that a lot of that, I know that intimately because that's what I did for years and years. I thought about what else can I do in my career. It was 13 years before I did anything about it. And that's not to say I didn't try to do things, right? I went from ad sales to the agency. I went to a different agency. I switched to ad sales. Then I switched to mobile ad sales, right? So there were pivots in there that I thought were meaningful, but they were never really addressing that underlying question of what am I meant to be doing? And that experience of the jumping, of knowing that the patterns followed me wherever I went, right? That was a real awakening when I realized when I went to sales and I started working just as hard as I had been on the agency side, while knowing that most people in sales didn't do that. I remember looking around being like, oh, it's me. Like I'm the person here. So that's more experience than it is a skill. But that experience of having been through I have no idea what I'm going to do, and taking a leap of faith to figure it out.
How did you figure that out? What pushed you to realize that not just you, but this subject that, you've changed jobs, but the subject was the same for the most part. What helped you realize that you needed a bigger change?
Yeah, I think it was a multi-layered process. The trigger for making a change came when I had been working in sales. I was the top salesperson globally at the company that I was at. And I think it was the second or third week of Q4, and I had two clients cancel huge contracts. Like they had budget cuts, huge contracts. And I was just like, I thought I was ready to coast. I was ready to focus on Q1. Anyway, they canceled. So I went down from 90% booked for the quarter to 40% booked to goal. And I just couldn't rebound from it because I had worked so hard to get to that place of having that booked. So that was like the first blow of the quarter. And
Those
then,
two cancellations, was it anything due to you?
no, it was purely budget cuts. And there could have been scenarios where they decided, how do I want to say this? You never know what goes on when people are truly making budget
For
cuts,
sure.
but I had really good relationships with all of these clients, and it was hard for them to call me and tell me that this was occurring. So regardless of the reason, I don't think it had anything to do with us. I think they just had to reprioritize, and we were on the chopping
And
block
yet
as a
it
result.
impacted you greatly and personally.
Yeah. So then a couple weeks later, our goals came out for Q1. I had worked so hard that year, really to maintain my status as number one, not so much to hit my goal, but to maintain my status as number one. And the thought of needing to repeat that exponentially, I could just feel it in my body. Like I couldn't handle it. So there had been this company that had been trying to recruit me for a period of time. And I finally answered one of their many inquiries, and I just said, sure, let's talk. I went to lunch. I did all the interviews. They offered me the job, and I accepted it. And after I accepted it, I had this really difficult moment of realizing I don't actually want this job, and I don't want the job that I have now. So, like, it was the definition of stuck, right? I was just like, I have no idea what I'm doing, but this pattern of just getting another job is not the solution, but it's what I've just done. So I'm going to live with it, but this is not the solution here. So I started the new job, wasn't super psyched, and went from a very high profile, big, like mobile advertising company to more of a startup that was well recognized, but it was still like in kind of the nitty gritty, like startup days. And I just didn't have the energy for that. And for the first few weeks I was there, I think it was a month later, I was sprinting on a treadmill insanely fast. And in a moment's notice, I tore my hamstring, my groin, my adductor, and I fractured my pelvis.
Oh my goodness.
And I also didn't ask anyone for help. I pretend like I just didn't, no one even knew that I was that injured because I just stayed silent, which is a whole separate topic. But that was the beginning of the end. It was, and I literally interpret that moment as the divine being like, stop running from your problems. Stop. You just took this job you don't want. Stop.
Yeah, you literally,
stop.
you just said what I was thinking, because earlier, as you described, heading into the goals of Q1 and feeling like, oh my gosh, like do I have it in me to push this peak performance yet again? And in my head, I'm thinking, yeah, that's the rat race. It's every year I have to improve on year over year performance, and I have to maintain the status. And getting injured on the treadmill is the literal manifestation of the analogy of the rat race. You're literally trying to outrun your past performance and keep pushing forward. And you didn't just burn out, you got injured physically. It's exactly what I was thinking in my head. And then it literally happened.
Yep.
It's also analogous to an athlete. I can imagine somebody who is looked up to as maybe a leader on a team, somebody who is an all-star athlete in any sport, and the world is watching them, and they're putting up numbers year after year, season after season. And at some point, you do get older, hopefully, and you have to keep maintaining because you have this image. You're an icon. and people are expecting something of you. If not the fans, then at least your teammates. And so you have to keep pushing. But probably for years before any retirement, each athlete probably has something in their head saying, how much more do I have in me? And it's probably exhausting at a certain point saying, I just don't know if I have it in me.
Yeah. And I didn't have it in me anymore. And that was really like the beginning of the end. That role lasted for about 6 months. And then I was in a depression. I didn't know that I was in a depression, but I had hired a coach to help me pivot. And then I hired a new coach right before I went on this trip. And basically went on this trip, came back. The trip is a whole story. I came back and resigned. I had absolutely no idea what else I was going to do. And it was about 6 months later that I started coaching. And the coaching was just like, my coach had been waiting for me to discover, like, to embrace the idea of coaching, because she had suggested it very early on. And I also was telling her, like, wow, all of these people from my old career are reaching out to me, asking me, how did I do this? What's going on? What am I doing? And I told her, they're not asking because they want to hear my story. They're asking because they want to know how to do it themselves. And we were on the phone. She goes, Karen, those are your clients. And it was like a huge, like, it was so obvious in hindsight, but
It's obvious because it is literally what you were doing with her.
Yeah. And I think my ability to build relationships and connect with people meaningfully, that's a skill that I established. It's part of who you are too, but that was a skill that I honed and established, particularly in sales. And that created this whole base of people that became clients. So that was really natural. But there were other things going on in my previous career. There were people who reached out to me when I was working in advertising or ad sales who wanted to make that change themselves.
Specifically into coaching or just ad change?
No, so they were like doing something totally different and they wanted to get into advertising, whether it was the agency side, whether it was the sales side. And I loved helping them do that. Like that. And it was like a side job I was doing on the side. I loved editing people's resumes and helping them tell a better story than what was like putting together a story versus just these things on paper, and how to sell themselves in terms of the expertise that they had and the experience to pivot.
It was very fulfilling work to you, but what's the one thing that was missing from the job?
That wasn't my job.
Exactly. Is that you weren't being paid.
Yeah. Yeah, I was not being paid for it. I loved doing it. It didn't matter, especially as I got further along in sales. Like, I was making such a significant income that was just fun.
Yeah.
It was just fun.
For sure.
And it just lit me up to be able to help people and then see that transition, have them call me when they got a job. It was the best. And I did it with my clients too, and people who worked for me previously in the agency, like to support people with getting promotions. And I really coached people on that. One of my favorite coworkers and employees for a really long time always said, sometimes I just wanted you to give me the answers, but you always helped me realize the answers on my own. And as an employee, that can be really frustrating. But I remember him saying that, and he said it a lot. And that's coaching, right? It's not, you're not just telling someone how to do something, you're supporting them with finding their way. And the way that they want to be doing something.
Right. Well, it's the power of self-discovery. That's a theme and principle that has come up a lot in my life, as taught to me by my father, how much more powerful it is to help lead someone, ask the right questions to get them to come to the conclusion themselves, and they will remember and take it to heart so much more. Your job is to ask the questions to tease out what is hiding inside, or that they need to get out and be more aware of.
Yep. That's exactly it. And there have been instances in my coaching career where this is probably the biggest pivot from sales. I really did believe that, like, this was the best solution. You should buy us. We're better than other things. And I did have to unlearn some of that as a coach, because I thought I knew better for a while, and really, I don't. And everyone's path is their own. We have free will for a reason. And I don't believe in accidents. I don't believe in right and wrong. Like, every decision that you make is a step closer to where you're meant to go, even if it's not what I would do. Everyone's on their own journey.
I can see how if you are very good at sales, you might think of it as manipulation, but ultimately what it is persuasion. You want to push your product and services. But ultimately the best type of sales isn't that you're selling somebody on something. It's that you're listening and understanding their needs in order to respond to it. And hopefully your product is the right solution for them. Understanding them greatly helps inform you on how to sell to them. Most of the time, it is a good solution. Is it the best one? I don't know. And that's really not important. That's not your job. Your job is to say, is this going to address your needs? The pain points that you have today, is this going to be a good solution for you? In coaching, it's somewhat the same. You obviously shouldn't be aggressive and you shouldn't manipulate, but you need to understand their needs greatly in order to then be able to ask the right questions to help them draw that conclusion, to guide them and help them find the right path. I think that there is a huge overlap in the skills.
Yeah, there is. And I would say that on top of that, like one of the things that I did in sales that I no longer do now in selling my services is I never said no to anyone. Because I just wanted the money to make the goal, right? And to see my percentage go up and see my name on that leaderboard. Mm-hmm. So I would say yes to things, even if it wasn't always the best fit, and I would make it work for them. But that is something that I have really had to work on as a coach, is saying no, like saying, I'm not the right person for you. This is not a fit. Or just saying no in general, like something that's not working in the client dynamic. I never did that before. Like sales was great for me previously because I could just be like a yes person, right? And I didn't want to deal with any confrontation. So sales was great because I didn't have to deal with any of it.
Yeah.
I just said yes and sold the thing and moved on. And I think I touched upon this earlier, but I personally really had to learn how to be direct, how to say no, how to call out what was happening right in front of me. In terms of a dynamic that wasn't working or a behavior that someone is exhibiting right in real time. I was really avoidant of all of that.
When you mean call out, do you mean
past.
to be aware of it and acknowledge and name it to yourself, or to literally say it to the person and call out their behavior?
To name it to another person, and for me too, right? To be able to name it versus like brushing it under the rug, because that you won't be an effective coach if you're not naming what's happening in a given moment. These are all things I had to learn in the coaching program I took, right? Like these were actual topics, like how to say no to people.
I've read the books on how to say no, and I've read the books on yes is the way. I've read them all. I like that they're in conflict with one another, but they ultimately mean the same thing: how to regain control of your time and IP. It's how to do the things you want and to avoid the things that don't interest you.
I had to learn, even though it's our natural way of being, especially if you look at like toddlers, my daughter's age, like to slow down. I had to learn how to slow down to the pace of life. I had to slow down to recognize what was happening inside of me in a given situation, to check in. That's not okay with me, or I'm feeling really uncomfortable, or I'm feeling contracted, but I want to say this thing to someone, right? I had to learn how to slow down. My goodness, that's taken me years to slow down. But my whole life previously was on auto drive, and it was... Is auto drive even a saying?
Autopilot or
autopilot,
self-drive.
Cruise control.
Cruise control is a good one. We could go with anyone.
Yeah, but I didn't know how to be still. I didn't know how to slow down. And that was a skill in my old career. That's what helped me excel, but it doesn't help me as a coach. What helps me as a coach and a human being and a mother and a wife and all the things and a friend is like to slow down. And that helps us speed up. There were a lot of things I had to learn that it was like what we were talking about earlier, having to unlearn these things that I thought made me successful. And they did in some way, but that success felt very empty. So learning to do it a different way, in a way that has left me with much greater fulfillment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We evolve also over time. What worked for you then doesn't work for you necessarily today. And the new skills that you have to pick up and learn are the ones that address your current needs today.
Yeah. And I always tell, oh my God, I must say this 3 times a week to my clients because people said it to me too. Your 50% is other people's 200%.
Yeah.
Your 60% is other people's 100%. So like really learning to recognize that I don't need to push as hard as I once believed.
Yeah. I completely understand that.
Yeah. I was miserable before, so something had to change.
There was, I assume, that a period where it was fulfilling and exciting and enjoyable until it wasn't. No? You were,
No.
since the beginning, you think you were miserable for 13 years of advertising?
Yeah, I think there was a short time frame in my second job out of college that was fun because I was learning a lot and learning how to be a professional. Like that was really fun. I think it's hard for a lot of my friends to hear that I found it so miserable, but the honest truth is I really didn't have a sense of purpose. And I wasn't fulfilled, and I was constantly questioning, why is my life this way? What else is there? What else can I be doing? And making decisions that left me feeling worse rather than better. I think I just spent 13 years skating around on the surface because I didn't know how to drop into a deeper level of inquiry for myself. So it's really hard to say that out loud, to say that, yeah, I spent 13 years just really unfulfilled. Were there fun moments? Absolutely. Did I have great friends that came out of that were present during that time? Yes, but I, inside of myself, was not very happy with me and with the life that I was leading, but I just didn't know what else to do. So
I'm collecting a lot of takeaways from this podcast, not just today's episode, but it's beginning this. I have started a list of takeaways that include a bunch of questions I don't yet know how to answer or resolve. And so here, this one right here is exactly what you're describing in your 13 years, feeling unhappy, unfulfilled, and yet good at sales within that role. So this question that I came up with is, how do we reconcile not being interested in a job that you're really good at?
I mean, the first thing that popped into my head was life is too short.
Yeah.
It's the same as like, how do you reconcile a job that pays you a lot, but that you don't like? It's the same. And I mean, it does, some of it comes down to your values. It really does. I really firmly believe that life is too short and there's so much that the world has to offer us, whether it's through our learning about ourselves or traveling and learning about other cultures. Like, I don't know if that's a good quote unquote answer.
There's no answer to that
to the
question.
question.
It's not. It's a question that I have come up with that I don't yet personally know how to answer or reconcile. It comes down to an individual choice. There's a lot of reasons why you might not like the job. You're not interested in it anymore. It could be the pay. It could be the monotony. It's not going anywhere. You're stagnant in your career growth. The environment. You could just simply be bored of the subject matter. You might predict the future, either the market or that business itself doesn't have a long future ahead of it. And so there could be a lot of things that are leading you to feel unfulfilled and not wanting to do this job, but you're really good at it. I've gotten offers to do jobs that I really don't want to do. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. I'm really good at it. I don't want to do that. And it's very challenging if you're really good at something, but you just don't want to do that job anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I relate to that 1,000%. I was really good at sales and I had been often asked to move into leadership positions, and I didn't want to do that because I had been a manager at different levels on the agency side, and I just wasn't interested. I just wanted to worry about myself. I didn't want to manage a team. I loved the autonomy. And when I left, people were like, "What are you doing? Like, you're on the fast track. What are you doing?" And it was just like, I don't know, but I have to trust that there's something better out there than this.
Yeah. What you're doing is you're
And
living your own truth and needs. And what you're not doing is fulfilling their expectations that they've imposed on you.
yeah, and I'm not buying into this default or de facto model of success, right? This definition of success that I've been handed isn't working for me. So I need to reevaluate what that is. And that was ultimately what it was about. Like, my values and my definition of what I wanted, like what was a successful life to me, didn't mirror the path that I was following. So that required a reset.
Yeah.
And
You did it. You took control and you made that decision and you followed that curiosity and interest.
yeah,
Commendable. Not
Yeah.
hard. Not easy to do.
yeah. No, it's been a total roller coaster, and I wouldn't change any of it.
The question I have been asking people for years is, given your natural strengths and your learned skills, what job might you excel at, but are also exceedingly overqualified for? And what I like to help prep people with this question is that it should be something that's like very fulfilling, a guilty pleasure. You enjoy doing it, but it also must be a job that you are qualified for. So if it requires having a certification, a license, or a level of education that you don't possess, you are not overqualified for that. And
Yeah, that's what stumps me.
right. So I'll give you some of mine
Please,
yeah. So
please.
executive assistant. And I'm very organized. I'm detail oriented. I'm meticulous. I have a knack for predicting needs, for planning, for scheduling, and for creating. And so I think that a lot of that would lend, I'm a great gatekeeper too. I think that a lot of that would lend towards being an excellent executive assistant. In the same vein, I think I'd be a really good waiter. I'm very conversational. I'm happy to make suggestions when asked, make connections when people are looking for that. You like this, try that. And then the last one I have here is certified pre-owned car salesman.
Certified pre-owned.
Certified
That's
pre-owned.
the-
Yeah, exactly. It really
that's the
doesn't matter, but I
caveat.
thought that was funny. But the car sales, I think that vehicles have an opportunity to be as impactful and maybe a commentary on one's personality and lifestyle just as much as like your clothes, and helping people figure it out if they don't already know what they're looking for. But that's all sales still, but it's sales for your lifestyle. And I love that stuff too. So those are examples. Like, I am overqualified for each of those, and it doesn't undermine any of those jobs. That's the risk, by the way, of this question is I always wondered if maybe the audience would be insulted if somebody says that they are overqualified for something. But in reality, if you're insulted, that's your own problem. There's always something that everyone is overqualified for. It's not a commentary on the listeners or the individuals. It's this person in front of me. So the point is that I'm curious if you have any ideas of how you might answer.
Yes, but so it's interesting because my first thing was like, oh, maybe like a restaurant host or a server. Hostess was really more where my brain went, but then I was thinking like, oh, a hairstylist, but I'm not qualified to do that. And then I thought a manicurist. That I'm not qualified to do that. I'm good at painting nails, but I feel like where I was headed was this idea of in environments where someone is sitting with you and just tells you a lot. And so like manicures can be one of those places, hairstyle, like the hair salon is one of those places. And also home organization would be, oh man, would I thrive at that? I actually thought that would be like, that could be a career thing for a little while. I don't know that it would bring me the same level of joy that coaching does, but I love the organization. I love the releasing of things. And I love even like working with myself or my husband or my daughter on like letting go of stuff and the psychology of that. I think that stuff is all
Are you a big
really
fan of the Marie Kondo
fascinating.
way?
No, I'm not.
Too much
I'm a
overboard?
big fan of my way.
Yeah. The reason why I ask these questions is, can we find the through line between the jobs that you believe you'd be really good at? You have confidence that it's something you would enjoy, you'd like, you'd knock it out of the ballpark and you'd be really great at it. Because ultimately, the through line, the commonality, the skills that are needed to do those things very well, to excel at those jobs, how do I leverage those skills and interests into what I currently do in this job? Or in your case, if you're coaching somebody into the next thing, let's unpack these things and figure out where are your skills and strengths and interests and fulfillment and enjoyment, to figure out what jobs out there incorporate these in a meaningful way.
Okay, wait. So I just had a thought about this. So 2 things. The first is the organization thing. One of the skills that I have that I probably had it before, but I didn't really recognize it, is that I can pull together disparate pieces of someone's story or like things that they're talking about and make sense of it as to like why they're showing up a certain way or why they're doing something. And that is a gift. And like organization is that, right? It's like taking things from different places and being able to cohesively put them where they fit best or where they belong. Yes. And I want to give you this because my friend asked me once, and now I ask all of my clients this, but she said, "What did you want to be when you were little?" I told her I wanted to be an FBI and a CIA agent, and I wanted to be a surgeon. Let's fast forward to my current life. I can't even watch like a drama show, much less a crime show on television. And I get faint, like 1 drop of blood and I'm out. Okay.
Yeah.
But these were the things that I wanted to do when I was little.
Yeah.
And the reason that she asked me, and I love this, and this is why I ask my clients, is because there were through lines there. So like FBI, CIA, it's all about putting together the pieces of the puzzles, investigating, helping solve something. That's what I do for people. I help them solve this puzzle of what am I meant to do. Surgeon, same idea. It's let's look and see, let's find what's really going on and let's resolve it and help you move forward in a quote unquote better way. And it's detailed. It's very focused.
Yeah.
It's very intensive in terms of how you show up to something like that. You're very prepared and very present. You have to be, otherwise you're going to kill someone on the table. And that is literally a representation of what I do now is coaching. So I feel like you could take that question for your podcast of what did you want to do when you were little? Because I feel like there are just so many clues. And it's been true for every single client that I have ever asked. If they tell me, oh, I wanted to do X, Y, Z, there's always a through line as it pertains to what they want to do. Well, like what they're drawn to do next, even if they're not ready to go do it.
Yeah, that makes complete sense to me. I actually, you don't know this, but a lot of times I start the conversation for these podcasts that I eventually edit out is, what did you want to be when you grow up? I actually ask that a lot.
Really?
And I do ask that. And in fact, when people are saying, well, regarding where I'm at right now professionally, I have said, like, I'm still trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up.
The other thing that I always think is so important to note, especially when I'm talking to clients about this, is that when you're young, you only know so many jobs, right? And like when you think about the world we live in today, the quantity of job possibilities is endless. And what I'm talking about with clients all the time is like what you might want to do next might not be in your awareness yet because we have this limited view, and kids literally they know like
fire truck,
teacher, nurse, firefighter, right? Like they know the things that they've experienced. They don't know anything beyond that. So that
they don't know data analyst.
Right. But they so they pick what they know based on the essence of the thing that they like doing. So For me, I liked investigating. I liked the people dynamics. I like learning how to read people. Did I know any of that when I was little? No, of course not. But I knew that there was the essence of something that I really liked in that.
Yeah,
And I just
it's
think
always been
that's
there.
so important because no one person knows every single career path that exists. They don't. They
Yeah.
literally don't. Or job title. And like, I tend to work with a lot of, do you know your human design?
No, and I've never even heard that term.
I work with a lot of manifestors, and manifestors are initiators, and they tend to create things that don't exist yet, or they take something that does exist and put their own spin on it. And so I tell my clients who have that classification in human design, because it's not who you are, but that they may not know what they're meant to do next because it doesn't even exist. Like,
Right.
it might not exist.
I have a list of dream jobs kind of things and has nothing to do with what's realistic either. I think part of that issue with what do you want to be when you grow up is that the limited knowledge and exposure to the options of careers, as well as you move into that college age, you start think you're pushed to think practically. So when
Totally.
you're in seventh grade, you want to be a baseball player, but when you're in college, you're told, and you start to get to the point of, statistically speaking, I won't be. So therefore, let me focus on put my efforts into something without diminishing return. I'm not going to keep investing in my hitting lessons because at this point, it's unlikely I'm gonna actually get an offer to join the Cubs. And so we start thinking practically and rationally, and you abandon some of those dreams.
It's the difference. It's the difference between what do I want to do and what should I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh, I really believe anything is possible. That's my own personal mantra.
The genesis of this was from me, but also it's a subject matter that was always interesting to me because it's all about human stories. And who are you? Who's Karen? Who's different from everybody else that I talk to? I have now interviewed, I think, 2 other people besides you who are in ad sales. And one question that's an outsider might have is, you've already had that. Why would you want to have that? I said, because I have never had Karen before.
Yeah, it's always different.
As well as the jump from that to the other thing, or from that thing from something completely different. And
Yeah.
and then even if it was the exact same A to B as somebody else, that person is not Karen. And so your unique decision-making process and skills that you possess, I can interview 10 teachers and I guarantee you that a third of them will identify different skills than the rest. I'm just naturally curious about these things. I find them fascinating. I find people interesting. And I find it empowering.
I told you this when we first spoke that I wish I had thought of this idea for a podcast. And I really mean that because it's amazing. Like, I am so thrilled to have it as a resource for my own clients to be able to scroll through and pick what resonates with them.
The metrics that I'm tracking here is time. And another maybe observation is, I would say I have yet to be this personal in an interview for the show. So I guess maybe that's a testament to your profession and your skills, that I felt comfortable enough to talk a little bit about myself when that's typically the opposite of my goal. So I just want to thank you for being present and being a listening ear and sound advice so far. And I just I wanted you to know that it's not lost on me that this is what you do and you're clearly good at it. And
Thank you.
accidentally turned this into a therapy session for myself.
I don't think so. I don't even have my coaching hat on right now. It's actually a miracle that I've learned in my life how to turn it on and turn it off, because I could not turn it off when I first started in this career. And I really appreciate you saying all of that. And I appreciate your transparency. And I also think what a service it is to be real about where you're at and for people to understand, like, yeah, he's asking that question because he doesn't have it figured out either. I think that's a beautiful thing. I think we can be so quick to assume that people have all the answers when really none of us have all the answers.
I think that's fair. Yeah.
I love what you're doing, and I appreciate the invite to come on and your trust in Ari to ask and to explore it. So it's been a lot of fun.
Thank you, Karen. Appreciate you being here. I want to thank Ari Stein for recommending Karen as today's guest, and to you, our listeners, for joining us on this episode of Transferable Skills. Remember, the skills you've gained can take you anywhere. Until next time, keep exploring those transferable skills.